Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for being with us here on this Friday afternoon. So glad you're here. Maybe it's Friday evening, maybe it's Saturday morning. I don't know, but we're happy you're here. I don't know if I said it, but I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and our guest this hour is Jimmy Akin, which is a very good thing because we're going to do weird questions with Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy Akin.
Hey there, how's it going, Cy Kellett?
Really, really good. This is a very popular thing. People love the weird questions, and we got some real weird ones. Coming up. Yeah. Also, is there a new Star Trek series out? Do you happen to know?
Well, there's sort of two at the moment.
Really?
One of them is Star Trek Prodigy, which is aimed at a younger audience, but is meant to have crossover appeal for adults. And then there is Star Trek Discovery, which has a new season out, and it's aimed at pleasing no one.
I gather you've seen some of it?
Well, not this season.
Oh, that's so funny.
I've seen enough of the previous seasons to tell me I'm in no hurry to see the fourth season.
That's so funny. I emotionally was there, Jimmy. I was like, but I hadn't got it up into my head yet that they just, there's nothing there that really grabs you. Like, I got to see this new season.
Yeah, no.
All right.
Characters are not, they're also vulnerable. You know, they all are so emotionally insecure and constantly having to affirm each other emotionally.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy did not need constant emotional reassurance from each other.
No, but
this is not heroes.
So you're saying in the future they have Gen Z people. The future has moved.
Well, actually, generations are thought to, by some, to in some extent go cyclically.
Yeah, right.
So that you have generations that are more with it and together and self-sufficient, and then you have a cycle that generations proceed through.
Oh, yeah.
But that's a theory.
Like fashions. Fashions seem to do that. Like the 1970s are back, which I'm very happy about. I thought the fashion of the 1970s. I mean, you can't get a tie
Even the
too
disco
wide.
era?
Oh, yeah. Come on. That was some good stuff. Especially wearing plaid with stripes and stuff. It was a beautiful era. Beautiful era. You ready for some weird questions?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. First of all, I should probably ask you, because today is Friday. What's today's episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
So this is airing this Friday, right?
Yes.
From when we're recording?
Yes,
Okay. It is part one of two of Pearl Harbor conspiracy.
Oh.
Because in 1941, at the beginning of December, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and there have been consistent questions about how much did the U.S. government know in advance, and could some in the U.S. government have let Pearl Harbor happen on purpose or even made it happen on purpose. And so in today's episode of Mysterious World, we talk about the background to that, and we take the story to a certain point where a figure enters the story who was very close. He was within 1 degree of separation of President Roosevelt, and he helped shape our policy towards Japan at the time. And he was a Soviet agent of influence.
Really?
And we know that for a
we can know that
fact.
now
And that's what and then we're going to tell his story next week.
Oh, this is good. This is good stuff. Okay. I always wonder about those. Sometimes, they'll say, and I wonder if you cover this at all, there's like knowing and then knowing. Like sometimes you have all the data, but then did you put all the data together? Do you see what I'm saying? Like
Ish.
Ish what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, like you can look back sometimes on a thing and say, well, that person knew because they knew this and this and this. But you don't actually know, did they put all that data together in their head and come to the next conclusion that looks obvious to us from the future, looking backwards?
In the case of Pearl Harbor, we can there are things that are still unknown and that can be debated and people can have different opinions about that are reasonable. But the idea of there being a Japanese attack on that weekend somewhere was anticipated.
Yeah.
That was anticipated.
Oh, that's awful.
The question is where.
Oh,
and
I see.
there were multiple possible candidates. Pearl Harbor was one of them. And so it was known that this was a potential target. People had been predicting it, but they'd also been predicting other targets.
Right. All right, I gotta hear about the Soviet agent though. That's interesting because that's something we have a great advantage of because the Soviet Union collapsed and we have all these documents.
We actually caught him earlier because of the Venona decrypts. Yeah.
Oh. Oh man, I gotta listen. All right, here's some weirdness. You ready for some weird questions?
Yeah.
Weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour and next. And a very fortunate thing happened. Jimmy Akin just happens to be our guest for that. Paul starts with a little flattery. I love these episodes. I've got a question for you. If humanity ever encounters another intelligent species in outer space or in the inner Earth or whatnot, would someone from said species be potentially eligible to be elected pope, assuming they met the other qualifications? Or is that office explicitly limited to humans?
It is not explicitly limited to humans. There is no magisterial statement that says only a human can be a pope. On the other hand, it is assumed that every pope will be a human. And in part, that's because so far humans are the only life form we've encountered that are fit subjects for baptism, and you need to be baptized before you get ordained a bishop, before you become the pope. And so if we met another species, intelligent species, whether from outer space or another dimension or the inner Earth, because we never want to forget about the inner Earth.
I was going to say, I'm so glad this guy mentioned that.
Yeah.
Like as another possibility.
Yeah.
People always forget that aliens could be coming from, I don't know.
Well,
like
in fact, there are theories that is where some of them are coming from. But if we met another intelligent species and they asked to be baptized, I'm pretty, based on a variety of factors, pretty sure the church would say yes to that. That if they say, I want to be baptized, I want to become a Christian, then they're a qualified candidate to receive baptism.
Right.
Because they're freely choosing it. And they may or may not have sin that needs to be forgiven, but they could still become a member of the body of Christ and receive graces in that way. So, because baptism does more than forgive your sins. Could they then be ordained to the Episcopal office would be the next question. And that's a bit trickier. And the church would have to make a determination on that, which cannot be foreseen at this time because it's pure hypothetical. But if they could be ordained to the episcopacy, then they could be elected the Bishop of Rome and thus the Pope.
All right, Paul, thank you very, very much for that question. Thank you for not forgetting the possibility that aliens might come from inside the Earth. It's like that movie. He's in the house with you.
Yeah, there's even a that's an urban legend though.
Oh, they didn't. I thought they made.
Well, they've probably done it with movies too, but
yeah.
It's an urban legend where the babysitter calls the police and they say the call's coming from within the house.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
It'll come back when it's hungry.
Very good. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour and next. Some really good ones, including one coming from someone's.
Oh, I know. The
train came back into the station.
Yeah, there's a term for the idea that the so-called aliens are actually a breakaway civilization living here on Earth with us. They're called cryptoterrestrials, for hidden terrestrials.
Oh, I like it. All right, we'll come back with that question from someone's 10-year-old brother right after this for Jimmy Akin on Jimmy Akin's, or no, I almost said Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live. Thank you, Jimmy. Take a break, Darren. Get me out of this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road, stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. So we won't be taking calls, but we got a lot of weird stuff coming up. This one I'm very happy about. It says...
Actually, before we do that, you just asked a weird question in the break that might be of interest to our audience.
Oh, okay. That's fine if you want to talk about
so
that.
why don't we talk about that? Because there's this new COVID variant out there right now called the Omicron variant. So I was asking me what I know about it. And I said, well, based on the slight amount of information that's available and that I've encountered, it sounds like, and this could be wrong because I could have encountered the wrong press reports, or it could be overturned by further findings. But what I've heard is that it sounds like the Omicron variant is more infectious but less harmful. And that's actually what we would expect with variants of COVID over time, because that's the normal trajectory of respiratory viruses. Viruses like this come into, and other parasites. Viruses are a kind of parasite. When a parasite comes into you, its principal thing it's interested in typically is completing its life cycle. And there are some parasites that will, parasites tend to affect the behavior of their hosts in one way or another, to help them complete their life cycle. So they want to get in, they want to use you to reproduce and make more copies of themselves.
Yeah.
And one parasite that affects ants, it causes the ant at night. Now, during the day, it doesn't do anything to the ant. The ant's going about doing its business.
Wow.
But then at night, it causes the ant, it affects the ant's brain. So it causes the ant to climb up to the top of a stalk of grass and bite down to hang on. And it just hangs there all night. And it doesn't let go until the sun comes up and it gets warm. And then, because the sun would cook the ant, it lets go and goes about its business as an ant. Now, the reason it makes the ant, so imagine a virus affecting humans that would let you do your job during the day.
Right.
But every night it forces you to go up to the top of a building and just stand there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's essentially what this is doing to the ant.
So weird.
Yeah, now the reason it's doing it to the ant is because this parasite needs to get into a sheep or a cow to complete its life cycle.
Oh, how clever.
And so it wants the ant up at the top of the blade of grass so that when a sheep or a cow comes by, it will eat the ant, and then it can get into the animal's gut and complete its life cycle.
What? That is wild.
And then the sheep or cow, poops it out, and it
on
gets
it
picked
goes.
up by ants. So
Yeah.
that's how the cycle works. Well, every parasite has a cycle of some sort that controls its growth and reproduction. Well, respiratory viruses are like that too. They want to get in you.
Yeah.
They want to hijack the machinery in your body to make copies of themselves.
Right.
And then they want those copies to get out. But they don't need to get you eaten by a cow or a sheep for that to happen.
No.
Instead, so they don't affect your brain and make you engage in this weird behavior. Instead, they affect you mechanically to cause you to engage in a different behavior, sneezing.
Oh, so that they can get
And
spread
so they
around
can
that
get
way.
spread around. Also, there is evidence that with some of these, they actually do affect your brain. Sometimes when people have come to the office before COVID, come to the office sniffling and sneezing and saying, "Don't worry, I'm no longer infectious," I've said, the germs make you say that. And
That's funny.
And it's true.
Oh, really?
Because one of the things that some viruses do in humans is they affect the human brain in such a way that it makes the humans more sociable. So that they want, even though a person may normally be a wallflower that stays at home, they get infected, and even before they realize they're sick, they decide, I need to go out and go to a party or have a party at my home.
Wow.
And this happens with influenza. So they actually can affect human cognitive behavior. But fundamentally, a respiratory virus doesn't need you dead to complete its life cycle. What it wants you to do is let it use your internal machinery to make copies of itself and then expel those copies out into the environment where they can be caught by other people.
Yeah.
So having the host dead is not in its interest.
No, right.
In fact, if anything, keeping the host alive and infectious for a longer period of time will serve its evolutionary interests.
Right.
And so there is selection pressure on parasites like viruses, respiratory ones, once they mutate and become able to infect humans and may be deadly because of the mutations. There is actually selection pressure for them to become more infectious and less deadly over time.
Oh, right.
So that they can stay in you and keep you infectious longer and make more copies of themselves. And that's why the common cold is today, at this stage of evolution,
It's
quite
not deadly.
infectious, but utterly,
Yeah.
it's just an annoyance
Right.
to the vast majority
Clever
of people.
virus. Yeah.
And so eventually, regardless of what happens with vaccines or other treatments, that's the trajectory we would expect COVID to follow. And 100 or 200 years from now, it'll just be part of the background common cold.
Yeah. Right. All right. But the thing about these variants, though, is as you get new variants, the names for them get scarier. Like, like Delta, that's not that scary. Omicron, that's terrifying.
Oh, no, not to me.
It's like Megatron. I think
no,
it's.
see, Omicron, there's two O sounds in Greek.
Yeah.
There's A and O.
Yeah.
And, just like we have a long O and a short O in English. Well, in English, we only have one letter O for both the long and the short O.
Uh-huh.
In Greek, they have two letters. They have the little O
Yeah.
for the A sound, and they have the big O for the O sound.
okay.
And so to distinguish the two letters, they call them in Greek, they call one of them little o and one of them big O.
They're clever Greeks.
And so in Greek, little o is omicron,
Oh, yeah.
omicron, little micron.
Yeah.
And big is mega, so the big O is omega. I am much less concerned about the Omicron variant than I would be the Omega variant.
Yes, I see that. Once we hit the Omega variant, we're dead.
Although if they follow the naming conventions, by that point, it should be less threatening.
Yeah, right. That's right. The names get scarier, but the actual viruses get less scary. Cardolin asks this question. My 10-year-old brother, and I would just add this, Cardolin, every other male on earth would also like the answer to this question. My 10-year-old brother would like to know if it's possible that Bigfoot could be an alien.
Other people have wondered, it's interesting you mentioned other people have wondered this, because back in the 1970s on the TV show The $6 Million Man, they actually had some episodes where the $6 Million Man met Bigfoot.
How did I miss that?
And it played by Andre the Giant.
Oh, nice.
And it turned out that not only was Bigfoot an alien, Bigfoot was an alien robot.
Oh,
So
that's why $6 Million Man is the greatest show ever made.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
So your 10-year-old brother might want to check out some of those old $6 Million Man episodes. In terms of is it possible? Well, it's going to depend on what you mean by possible. It's certainly logically possible. There's no contradiction in terms between the term Bigfoot and the term alien. So it could be logically possible that Bigfoot would be an alien. And in fact, there are people in the Bigfoot community who think that Bigfoot may be an alien or something under the control of aliens or like an interdimensional being or something like that. And so that theory is out there in the community that looks at these issues. And personally, I think I haven't studied it in detail, but I find it implausible that there would be, take a step back. There are lots of animals that haven't been discovered yet.
Yeah.
And these are sometimes called cryptids. Bigfoot would be a cryptid because it hasn't been discovered by standard science.
Sure.
And one of the reasons that it hasn't been discovered is because we don't have a dead Bigfoot body. which would be, we've got fuzzy photos and things like that, but we don't have a dead body. And typically, in order for a species to be recognized by science, you need a dead body. You need what's called a voucher specimen to vouch for the fact this is a real animal. And so there are lots of real animals. In fact, we have not discovered most of the animals that are on Earth yet, but that's because they're microscopic.
Yeah.
You need, for an animal to exist, it needs a breeding population, just like we were talking about with parasites.
Right.
They need a population where they can, especially if it reproduces sexually, you need a population where they can encounter each other and mate and reproduce. And so you have to look for not just a single animal, but for a population of them that could sustain itself over time. Otherwise, the animal will go extinct. So you actually need a fairly sizable population of animals if they're going to survive over time. And that means we shouldn't be looking for just one Bigfoot. We should be looking if it's like some kind of hominid or, member of the ape family.
Yeah.
We would need a bunch of Bigfoots so that they could reproduce and maintain their population. Well, if they're bigger than humans,
Pretty hard to hide.
it's hard to hide.
Yeah.
Now, I acknowledge the U.S. is a big place. We've got lots of woodlands, but it's improbable that there would be an undiscovered giant great ape
Yeah.
living in the United States and Canada for decades and remain undiscovered. I mean, if nothing else, you would expect we would find skeletons.
Right.
Like we find skeletons for bears and cougars and other things, and we could get our voucher specimen that way. So it's not probable, it's not impossible, but it's not probable that an animal that big would be living in our area of the world with all the technological sensors and cameras and people having forest traps. I mean, they'll have camera traps in the forest where to survey the local animal population. The camera will have a motion detector. It'll go off when an animal passes by, and it'll get a picture of an animal. They can tell what animals live in this area.
And thus far, no Bigfoots.
Thus far, no Bigfoots. So it's not likely that a large ape would remain undiscovered today, unless it's paranormal. Unless it's working for aliens or it comes from another dimension or something like that. And so one way of squaring the reports of Bigfoots with the fact we haven't been able to get a voucher specimen would be to propose that Bigfoot is not just a big terrestrial ape, that it is something more exotic than that and could be connected with aliens or interdimensional travel.
What if there was an alien species that just really loved vacationing in the American Northwest? Mm-hmm. This is like their Tahiti, and they just come and hang out in the American Northwest every now and then.
Well, there, as they say in Latin, de gustibus non est disputandum. There's to be no disputing about tastes, including where you want to go for vacation.
By the way, did I get my plural correct? Bigfoots? Or is there a controversy over there?
Bigfoots is fine.
All right.
So is octopuses, by the way.
Oh, yes. People like to say octopi.
Yeah, but this word comes from Greek roots, not Latin. You wouldn't want octopi. If you were being hyper faithful to the Greek, you might try octopodes. But
an octopode, that makes sense.
But really, this is an English word now. Marine biologists talk about octopuses.
Yeah, as did Ringo Starr. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that
was not plural. That was possessive. In an
Jimmy, you are so good at grammar. Oh, that's you are correct. Because that was the singular. It was an octopus's garden. All right, I'm going to read you this question because it says Father Guillermo, and what does MW listener mean?
Oh, Mysterious World.
Oh, listens to Mysterious. Oh, okay. So I saw this question posted in Twitter and thought, now this is a Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World kind of stuff. This is Jimmy Akin Mysterious World kind of stuff. If you had conjoined male twins, could one get married and the other,
Could one get ordained?
or one
and the
get
other
ordained and the other? I
married?
read that wrong. I apologize. Does the extent of conjunction affect the answer? And I didn't leave you. I left you 13 seconds to answer that question.
Well,
so.
that just gives us a
good tease.
a nice cliffhanger.
Yeah. Father Guillermo, thanks very much for the question, and we will take this break. Don't forget, we got a free ebook. We always got a free ebook for you over at shop.catholic.com, where there's also about a million things on sale, 10, 25, even more percentages is off. But get that free ebook over at shop.catholic.com. Right back with more Jimmy Akin. No, I keep saying Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. More weird questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com. Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
This is Debbie Georgiani.
And I'm Jerry Usher.
Join us for Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, Monday at noon Eastern.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. This weird question comes from Father Guillermo, who wants to know if conjoined male twins could live such that one was ordained a priest and the other was married.
So the can they be married question is a delicate one, but the answer and the extent of conjoining will affect things, because in order to be able to be married, you have to be able to perform the marital act. Mm-hmm. And if their bodies were conjoined in such a way that they could not perform the marital act, then they would have, in canon law terms, antecedent, perpetual, incurable impotence, which is an impediment to marriage.
Yeah.
So, but assuming their bodies are not conjoined in a way that would prevent them from paying the marital debt, they actually can be married. And so it's a little delicate, and you don't want to let your mind go too far in that direction, but yeah, they can be married. And in fact, there can be conjoined twins who have been married, conjoined male twins. Ng and Chang Bunker are famous as this. They were famous in the 19th century. They were conjoined twins from Thailand, or Siam, as it was called, and they were the original Siamese twins. That's why the conjoined twins are often called Siamese twins. It's because Ng and Chang Bunker they were from Thailand, but they immigrated to the U.S., and they were very famous. They like traveled on the showbiz circuit and circuses and things like that. And so they were very well known, and most people had never heard of any other conjoined twins. So conjoined twins became known as Siamese twins after them, after Eng and Cheng. And Eng and Cheng were both married to different women, and between the two of them, they had 21 children.
Wow. So that answers one question.
Yeah, so it can, and there's no objection in Catholic theology to that. It does involve some delicacy and discretion, but it's possible.
Sure.
And so if they could be married, well, they could also be ordained.
Yeah.
You could have two conjoined twins who are both male who get ordained to the priesthood, and that would be fine. And so both of these situations are possible, and there's no intrinsic reason you couldn't have one of them make one choice and become ordained, and another make the other choice and become married. It would be very unusual, and certainly a bishop, because bishops are in control of who gets ordained, would want to review the situation and say, is this really the best path here?
Right.
But there's nothing intrinsically impossible about it. So in principle, however advisable or inadvisable a given bishop might judge it to be, in principle, it would be possible for one of the twins to be ordained and the other twin to be married.
Father Guillermo, thank you for that question. That's one I have not heard before, and I really appreciate the chance to get to talk about it because it's weird questions with Jimmy Akin and talk about things that we don't usually get to talk about. Let's see, who we got next? Roseanne is next, Jimmy, and she asks this. I know that it is fine for Catholics to believe in evolution, and I do. But recently, I have read some academics who argue that human morality is a product of evolution. That is, people who acted in antisocial ways were ostracized by society and more likely to die, and therefore, people having our current moral orientation evolved through natural selection. Can this view be reconciled with the Catholic understanding, or is it in opposition?
It can be reconciled with it. In fact, it's what you would expect. So the way the church views human morality, because we're the only animals on earth that have it fully, is that God built certain principles into our nature, and if we act on those principles, things are going to go better for us. So, this common appeal when you're talking about, let's say, the Ten Commandments. Okay, if you go around killing people willy-nilly, or committing adultery willy-nilly, or stealing willy-nilly, or lying willy-nilly, it is going to go badly for you, and it would for society if society did those things.
It'd be like San Francisco. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Or Milwaukee or something. And so, God designed humans in such a way that if you obey certain principles that are built into human nature, it will go better for you. Now, he didn't design everybody that way. So, for example, there are creatures on Earth that don't have an equivalent of monogamous marriage or even marriage at all. So the thou shalt not commit adultery would not apply to them. For example, salmon. Okay,
right.
Salmon, they swim upstream at their mating time. The female lays eggs, the male fertilizes them, and then they both die.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is not a good method. I mean, I'm sure it's good for salmon.
Salmon's not for humans. Or octopi. Octopuses.
Octopodes.
They mate, and then typically the male dies immediately. So he's not around to commit adultery with anybody.
Oh.
And the female lays the fertilized eggs and watches, the female has the fertilized eggs, I should say, and watches them.
Yeah.
And she watches them, and she blows water over them to keep them oxygenated, and she protects them from predators, and then they start hatching, and she sees them hatch, and then she dies.
That is so weird.
Yeah. Now.
Yeah.
What happens if you cut the female octopus's, there's a possessive, if you cut the female octopus's optic nerve?
And so she doesn't ever see them?
She doesn't ever see them hatch.
She doesn't die?
She doesn't die. She keeps living for years. And so it's the female octopus death is a visually triggered response. It's a reflex because now she served her function. But notice how adultery would make no sense in this context.
No, right.
So not everybody has has the same principles built into them, but we do.
Right.
And things go better for humans when they do. Now, how did God get those principles there? Well, according to the standard scientific account, humans evolved over time. And according to the standard theological account, God simply used evolution to accomplish his ends. And so that's how God got the principles there. But from an evolutionary theological perspective, it's part of his overall providential design and so forth. So there's perfectly compatible. And then once the principles are there, what's going to happen? Well, if humans have been built in such a way that murder and adultery and stealing are harmful to the human community, and someone starts doing those things, he's going to be ostracized, he's going to be punished, he may be put to death, which would inhibit his ability to survive and reproduce.
Right.
So there becomes selection pressure on humans to not do those things. And you would expect evolution over time to, unless conditions change, to reinforce those behaviors and make humans less prone to doing those things over time, which may be why modern 21st century humans are actually way less violent than humans were in the past, because there's been selection pressure on us to be less violent and to commit murder less and to commit war less and so forth. Steven Pinker, the cognitive scientist and linguist, has an excellent book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he documents how over any time scale you want to pick, from tens of thousands of years to thousands of years to hundreds of years to a given century to just decades, the trajectory in human society is towards less violence. No matter what you hear the reverse hyped up. It's, oh, we're so dangerous and warlike today. No, we are way more peaceful than we used to be. And this is what you would expect, given that these principles have been embedded in human nature. You would expect them to encourage people to do what's better for them over time, and the humans that evolve to do that will succeed more. And so this is simply God's plan working itself out. It's kind of like originally, eyes would have been impossibly complex for certain early life forms. So they didn't start with fully developed eyes. They would have started with light-sensitive patches that over time became more sophisticated and grew into eyes. So once you have that principle of light sensitivity embedded in a creature's nature, you could expect it, assuming nothing changes, you could expect it over time to become more refined sense of vision.
Right.
And in the same way, once you have the essence of the Ten Commandments embedded in human nature, you would expect over time, because it's in our interest to do those things, that's how God made us, you would expect a more refined applicability of that to manifest over time. And we've actually seen that, at least until conditions changed when the internet showed up and suddenly porn exploded in an unprecedented historical way.
The consequence of which is, what do you think, that makes us more violent?
No, we're less violent over time, but as far as fidelity to one's spouse.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Oh, I thought I got you. Yeah. Right. But you can even see, like, like if someone were a murderer at a young age, the likelihood is that person is going to get into a violent conflict and die before they reproduce, or spend their life in prison. And so,
in which case, they're likely not to reproduce either.
Right. Yeah. That's very interesting. Who was that? That was Roseanne. Roseanne, thanks.
But these two things go hand in hand. They're exactly what you would expect on God's design.
All right. Well, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
What have you always wanted to know about the Vatican? Well, I'm your Vatican insider, and I answer that question when I bring you the news about the Pope, Vatican City, and much more. I answer your wonderful questions about the Church. I share insights and stories told by my amazing guests from a broad spectrum of church ministries.
Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis, Saturday night, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. We get 2 hours with Jimmy Akin, and it's weird questions for Jimmy Akin, one of the fun things we like to do on Fridays. And we're very glad you're here with us. This next question comes from Susan, who's expressing interest in a phenomenon I am not familiar with, Jimmy.
Oh, really?
So, this is new to me.
Okay.
What evidence is there for ball lightning?
Mm-hmm.
I saw it roughly 20 years ago and was fascinated, but at that time, there were no pictures or good theories.
So, for the education of Cy Kellett,
yes, please. I wasn't aware that this was a thing.
Yeah, ball lightning is a reported phenomenon where electrical discharge occurs in spherical form.
Wow.
And so the spheres can range in size. They're not huge, but I don't know if they get up to basketball size, but they can be like baseball sized and things like that.
Yeah.
And ball lightning is reported to behave in very interesting and strange ways. So you can be sitting inside a house, and let's say it's got glass windows, and the ball lightning can come through the window and bounce around in your house. And
I would not like that.
No, and it has hurt people. At least these are according to the historical reports. Now, in terms of the evidence for ball lightning is well accepted in the scientific community. We have enough reports and even some photographs and things like that I'm unaware of there being any serious doubt about it being real. And there have been attempts, actually as far back as at least the 1970s, 1980s, to try to reproduce it in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that ball lightning is rare, at least at altitudes where it encounters humans. I mean, who knows what happens up in the sky?
Superman.
It's possible that ball lightning could be responsible for, like, the reports of Foo Fighters.
Oh, yes, right.
During World War II, which were balls of light that seemed to shadow airplanes. So it's possible that that there are more ball lightning encounters up at altitude than there are down here on the Earth.
Sure.
But it is regarded as a real scientific thing. It is also a mysterious scientific thing because it's so rare, we haven't been able to effectually study it and determine exactly what causes it and what conditions are necessary. There have been attempts to do that. But thus far, as based on the reading I've done, it doesn't appear that anybody has solved exactly why this happens. But that means it's mysterious, and yes, I'll be talking about it in the future on Mysterious World.
That's why something like ball lightning, which I was not aware of, like when you see those videos from like jets, the Navy jets that they're seeing aliens or what.
UAPs.
Yeah, it just seems to me there are so many phenomena that we don't know about, or that the person who leaps to, it's alien. I hate to say it, but maybe it's not. Maybe that's an electrical phenomenon we're not familiar with.
And in the UFO community, serious ufologists take seriously the idea that some reported UAPs may be, not all of them, not like the Tic Tac, that didn't look like ball lightning.
No, sure, right.
But that some UAPs, especially things that just seem to be glowing circular lights in the distance, may be natural phenomena like ball lightning or earthquake lights, they're called, which are thought to be electrical discharges caused by geological things happening under the ground.
Which you would kind of expect. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of magnetic material in the ground that once it moves.
Well, and just even like granite, grinding against itself in a tectonically active region, that produces energy. And if some of that energy is electromagnetic, it could result in an electromagnetic discharge.
Could ball lightning be the solution to another mystery?
Which one?
Spontaneous human combustion?
It's possible. It's possible that ball lightning could ignite a human and thus cause them to spontaneously combust, just like getting struck by lightning.
Yeah, would do that.
Can do that. Although ball lightning is not transient to the degree that regular lightning is. Regular lightning, wham, it's all over in a flash, literally. Whereas ball lightning can persist.
Wow.
So that suggests that the balls of the lightning are like a plasma, an electrically charged plasma, rather than just a single discharge.
I got you.
And that they can endure, and that could allow, at least for a few seconds, and that could allow them to trigger the combustion of a human. But I don't think spontaneous human combustion has a single cause. I think there are multiple causes, including smoking in bed when you're drunk.
That'd do it, yeah.
Yeah, but ball lightning could be responsible for some cases.
All right. Thanks, Susan. Appreciate the ball lightning question. Frank asks this. If parents and godparents can present a newborn child for baptism, could someone, say a son, ask a priest to forgive the sins of their mother or father who are essentially, due to the advanced nature of Alzheimer's, babies?
So this would be when Frank says forgive their sins, that would presumably either be through baptism, if the parents have not been baptized yet, or through the sacrament of the anointing of the sick, since if they're effectively mentally at a cognitive level equivalent to a newborn, they're not going to be able to do confession.
Yeah.
Well, if they're already baptized, then absolutely you can request the anointing of the sick for them, because if they're already, at least if they're already Catholic or like Eastern Orthodox or something, they're a member of a communion that has the anointing of the sick. And unless they've said otherwise, then it is presumed that they would want done for them what you would expect as a member of a Catholic or an Orthodox community. And that would include the anointing of the sick. So yes,
okay.
If they're already baptized. Now, in the case of a Protestant, it's more dicey because Protestants don't have the anointing of the sick. And so, I mean, they may have an equivalent in some like charismatic circles and stuff. They may anoint people with oil, but it's not the sacrament. And so, and they don't typically associate it with the forgiveness of sin. So in that case, what canon law would want is for the person prior to developing Alzheimer's to have expressed an interest in having this done for them. And if they had expressed an interest in it, then yes, the priest could go ahead and give them anointing of the sick. What about baptism? Well, okay, if they're not baptized, what canon law would want is for prior to baptism for them to have expressed some interest in becoming a Christian or being baptized or language like that, in which case you could go ahead and baptize them since you had their consent. If, on the other hand, if they have not given their consent in one of these ways, either as a non-baptized person to being baptized or as a baptized person who has indicated they don't want the anointing of the sick, then canon law does not want them given to them. And so that's the way canon law is written. Now, does it have to be that way? Because this is weird questions, and the person is asking not asking what does canon law say about these situations. He's saying, could someone do this? And I've actually devoted a significant amount of thought to this because my mom was a non-Catholic who she was Protestant. And she died unexpectedly.
Yes.
And there was a question of anointing of the sick. Similarly, my dad, when he passed on, he, for a time, was in a coma and there was this issue of is it possible for him to receive the anointing of the sick if he doesn't wake up and request it?
Right.
Well, he did wake up, and I talked to him about it, and I said, look, this doesn't mean you would be Catholic. It just is a way of asking for God's grace. Would you like this? And even though he couldn't really talk, he said yes. And I had a nurse there as a witness.
Okay.
So he definitely got the anointing of the sick. Well, I've also been consulted by priests about similar situations because their parishioners come to them. They say, my loved one is in this situation, and I'd really like for them to receive the sacraments. What's possible here? And I think it is possible theologically, not canonically.
I see what you're saying.
But theologically, I think it's possible to administer the sacraments on a conditional basis and in these situations and say, okay, if you are open to baptism on whatever deep level that is, I baptize you. Or if you are open to the anointing of the sick on whatever deep level that may be, I anoint you. And so I think it is possible to theologically possible, to reverently administer the sacraments in these situations on a conditional basis that respects the free will of the person who is incapable of speaking for themselves. And so because that's what the condition is. If they're open to receiving God's grace in this way, then I'm making it available. If they're closed, well, then I'm not making it available.
Yeah,
and so
the
conditionality ensures the respect the Church wants for the person's freedom in the matter.
Right. But it also allows this. I mean, the person. We don't know what they would desire at that moment, and so
we don't. And if they recover, then you can say, well, here's what we did. What is your decision regarding all that?
Wow, how interesting. I'm going to try to get Miriam's question in. I'm going to skip to Miriam's because I think you can do it. There's been a lot of talk at my work about Mercury being in retrograde and that it makes everything on Earth topsy-turvy. Could this really affect things on Earth? And she says, I thought this was completely unfounded, but then I thought about how the moon controls the tides and how people seem to act crazier when there's a full moon. Would love Jimmy's opinion on this.
Okay, so the idea that the phase of the moon has an effect on human behavior is called the lunar effect.
Yeah, I think that's where we get the word lunacy, as a matter of fact. It comes from this idea.
Yeah. The idea of a robust lunar effect on Earth and whether it causes people to go crazy is disputed in the scientific community. There are studies that point both ways on this.
Yeah.
Also, it may be something as simple as more crimes get committed during the full moon, not because the moon makes people crazy, but because the moon makes it easier to see as you're committing the crime.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So that's debated what effect the moon has with regard to that. It's certainly true that the moon has an effect on the tides and on creatures that live in tide pools.
Yeah.
Whether it has one on humans is disputed. When it comes to the sun actually has an effect that you wouldn't expect, a bunch of them. What sun sign you're born in really does matter.
Really?
Yeah. There are statistically significant correlations between issues, between things like neuroticism, educational attainment.
But does that have to do with
human
seasons?
growth? Hang on.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I got curious.
And it is correlated with what sun sign you're born in. But there's the music. So there's our new cliffhanger.
We will be right back with more weird questions with Jimmy Akin, and we'll find out about sun signs and their effect on you. I do, one community you did not mention, which is affected by the lunar cycle, is the werewolf community. And I just out of respect for them, I thought I'd mention that.
Sure thing.
Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. We'll be right back after this. We'll continue with our talk about Mercury in retrograde and sun signs, and can this affect you? We'll be right back with that and many more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And we're actually in the midst of a question. Miriam asked, there's been a lot of talk at her work, she says, about Mercury being in retrograde. And that's making everything on Earth topsy-turvy. She just wants to know, is that actually possible, that there could be some celestial effect on Earth?
Yeah, and she mentions, how like the moon has an effect on Earth with tides, and it's less clear to what extent the moon affects human behavior. There are actually scientific studies that point in both directions on that. And at the close of our previous episode, I was mentioning how the sun has an effect. And now that's obvious, duh, that's why it's day or night.
Right. There's that effect, yes.
So you've got all the day-night effects. But in addition to the standard day-night effects we think about, it's actually been shown scientifically that what sun sign you're born in matters, that it has effects on neuroticism. So it has psychological effects. It has effects on educational attainment. It has effects on growth of the body and things like that. And it is correlated with what zodiacal sign or astrological sign the sun is in at the time of your birth. But it's not what you might think. This is not a straightforward validation of astrology.
Right.
Because it turns out it's not just the month you're born in that's important in this regard. It's which preceding 9 months from your conception to your birth, where was the sun during that? Because if you're in a northern latitude, then if you are in the womb over the summer rather than during the winter, your mom is going to be exposed to more sunlight.
Yeah.
And thus, she's going to metabolize more vitamin D from that sunlight.
See, I never would have thought of that.
You're going to be exposed to more vitamin D in the womb.
Yeah.
Which is going to have an effect on your body's growth and your neurological development and things like that. And so the reverse will be true if you're in the southern hemisphere. If you're in the southern hemisphere during the northern summer, that's the southern winter.
Right.
And your mom will be receiving less sunlight, and you'll be receiving less vitamin D in utero. And so you'll have a flip in the meaning of the star signs between the northern and southern hemispheres. And if you're living on the equator, doesn't make any deal. Yeah.
You're probably going to be born on a hot day. That's all we know.
Yeah. So there can be indirect effects that are not immediately obvious from celestial bodies. And the question would then be, well, what about Mercury in retrograde? So we should mention what retrograde means. Retrograde is what happens when, from a perspective of a person standing on the Earth, a star or planet seems to start moving backwards. That's why it's called retrograde, because it seems to be moving backwards. And what causes that is Earth is passing it in its orbit. So Mercury has a little small orbit around the sun. It's like, if memory serves, it's like 88. It's got an 88-day year. And so periodically, as Mercury is going around the sun, Earth is going to pass Mercury. Now, Earth is farther out. It's moving slower. But at various points, the Earth will pass Mercury or will pass Venus, the two inner planets. And when that happens, Venus and Mercury will look like they are starting to move backwards because we're moving past them. It's like when you move past a car on the freeway.
Yeah, it looks like
it looks like that other car, from your perspective in your car, it looks like the other one's going backwards as you pass them. And that's what's happening with Mercury and Venus. So does Mercury influence things on Earth? Well, there are 4 forces, fundamental forces, that are known to science at present. And there are hints of a 5th force, and there may be others, but there are 4 we know about. Gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. So the strong and weak nuclear forces, as their name would imply, only affect things on the nuclear level. They apply to the nucleus of atoms, or the nuclei of atoms. So Mercury is millions of miles away. It's too far for Mercury to influence the Earth by the strong or weak force. Electromagnetism. Well, that travels at the speed of light, and Mercury is only a few light minutes away. But it's also tiny, and it only reflects light. It doesn't make its own, really. And so it's hard to see how electromagnetic radiation coming from Mercury could have much of an effect on Earth. It would be drowned out by all the electromagnetic energy we have here. And that's why we don't see Mercury in the daytime. It's, half the time it's up there in the daytime sky and we don't see it because the light it's reflecting from the sun is washed out by all of the other light that's coming from the sun that scatters in the sky with what's called Rayleigh scattering, which makes it blue. So it would be hard to see how Mercury could be having an electromagnetic effect on Earth. Then there's gravity. And, gravity also travels at the speed of light, and there is a very slight gravitational tug on Earth from Mercury, and when it goes retrograde, there would be an extremely slight gravitational tug on things on Earth, but that would presumably be washed out by much greater gravitational effects, just like the light from Mercury is washed out by the light from the sun in the day. The gravity from Mercury would be washed out by other things that exert much more of a gravitational influence on Earth, like the moon.
Yeah.
And so there doesn't seem to be a good basis in the forces known to science for saying that Mercury, unlike the sun or the moon, that Mercury would have a notable impact on the Earth even when it goes into retrograde. Now, having said that, there could be forces that are unknown to science. Like I said, we've got some preliminary evidence. There may be a fifth. But if so, we still don't know how it works. And even though there have been attempts in the last few decades to say, okay, let's forget classical astrology, let's do scientific studies and see if we can find correlations.
Right.
And there have been some reported correlations, even though we wouldn't know how to explain them. This kind of more scientifically based neo-astrology, if you want to call it that, that's based on scientifically establishable correlations. I'm aware of that field. I haven't done a lot of reading in it yet, but certainly the idea that Mercury being in retrograde or being in any other phase of its motion with respect to the Earth, it's not easy to see how it would have any notable effects on Earth. But I'm always open to seeing more science.
Thank you very much for the question. That one came from, who was that one come from?
That was Miriam.
Oh, that was Miriam. Yeah, I got myself a little out of order here. But Miriam, thank you.
You did.
Very, very much for the question. I appreciate it. It is weird questions with Jimmy Akin. I think one of the nice things about Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and then when you answer a question like that, is kind of a modeling of how to make a reasonable answer to those kinds of things. And I think as Catholics, we've got to do that. There's no fear of science, and there's no fear of maybe discovering some new connection somewhere, but you got to be reasonable in the application of those things. Yeah.
And that's that's on Mysterious World, like here, that's one of my missions, is to model critical thinking skills and around interesting content, but as people learn about the interesting content, they also see the reasoning process.
Yeah.
And I've had parents who have their kids listen to Mysterious World write me and say, my kids are learning critical thinking skills by listening to how you reason through things.
I think it's a great service, Jimmy. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin. Some of them get pretty weird coming up right after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
I was listening to the EWTN, and you were on with one of your little snippets, and you said some words that brought me back to the church. I've been away for a long time. You don't know how much I appreciate those words, and I don't know why those particular words that day got to me.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Jimmy Akin, our guest, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, author of a whole bunch of things. You can find him at jimmyakin.com. You can just search the internet for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you'll find what the current episode is and the previous 100 and probably 70-something, I'm guessing.
We're in the 180s now.
180s of episodes there at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where you explore paranormal phenomena, scientific phenomena, religious, faith stuff, all kind, and any mystery you're willing to take it on.
Pretty much any natural and supernatural mysteries. We even do true crime, but I don't do a huge amount of that because of the squick factor.
What's it called?
The squick factor.
What's the squick factor? I don't. Is that a thing? Or it's not
no.
Okay.
It's the response of something being icky.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. All right, Jim wants to ask you this, Jimmy. If Adam and Eve didn't commit original sin, but some other descendant did, say Cain, would we have a split line of humanity, one line with a fallen nature and one without?
Well, that's how we got elves.
I'd completely forgotten about that, Jimmy. We got elves, yeah.
Well, the answer is we don't know. And we haven't been told. Now, it's going to depend on your theory of how this works. According to one theory, theologically speaking, Adam represented the there's not a way to really avoid a technical term here. He represented what's called the federal head of the human race. And the basic idea is that he wasn't just the leader of the early human community, but in a sense, he was its designated representative before God.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of like the president. You know, if the president of the United States represents America to other countries, and so if the president, let's say, lobs nuclear missiles at other countries, they are likely to lob them back.
Right.
But it's this one man that makes a decision that affects the entire nation.
Okay.
And the basic idea is that just like the president is the legal representative or the federal representative of the whole American people, Adam, on this theory, was the federal representative of the entire human race. And so the reason on this view that the entire human race fell is because Adam fell. And so that had consequences for everybody else. And notice on this theory, if only Adam had fallen, it would have effects for everybody, even if Eve had not fallen. Or if Eve had fallen and Adam had not, the effects of sin would have been contained to just Eve.
Right.
Because Adam would have served as a legal representative barrier between what Eve did and everybody else. So there are some interesting effects of this model. But there are other models too. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's not just Adam that is important, but Adam and Eve as kind of the first parents of humanity. They both played an essential role in propagating the fall to humanity. And so if either of them fell, they might not have been able to pass on sanctifying grace to their offspring, and thus the effects of original sin would have propagated to everybody after the first generation. Well, okay, maybe. That's a possible theory. The church hasn't condemned that theory. The church hasn't answered the questions in this area because it really hasn't had a need to. What we know is we're in trouble and we need redemption.
Yes, right. We know that.
Yeah, but these hypotheticals are interesting to think about. The church just doesn't have a teaching on them. So if you want to imagine a scenario where, let's say, Adam and Eve don't fall, but Cain does, or Abel does, or Seth does, but not the other brothers, could we have a fallen line of humanity and unfallen lines? Well, you can imagine that, sure. You'll need to think of a model that could explain exactly how that would happen, but it's not precluded, it's not ruled out by church teaching. This is an area where really all we've got is speculation.
Yeah, right. We know what happened, but we don't know all the conditionals, what could have happened. Thanks, Jim, very much. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Colin is next with this question. To my understanding, Colin writes, animal souls lack the necessary ingredient of reason to be eternal, so their souls perish with their bodies when they die. In Numbers 22, the Lord opened the mouth of Balaam's donkey so he could speak to his owner. It appears that God raised Balaam's donkey's nature for a moment to include the use of reason to speak and convince Balaam of his sin. What would have happened to the donkey if he had died in that state, if he momentarily possessed a rational soul required for eternal life, and he used it to obey God by convincing Balaam of his sin? Would the donkey have then had the possibility of eternal life in heaven?
So the premise that Colin uses is expressed in the first sentence he says, to my understanding, animal souls lack the necessary ingredient of reason to be eternal. And that's a very common opinion. Lots of people have thought that. St. Thomas Aquinas thought that, and other theologians have proposed that. It's not church teaching, though. And so it's a matter of theological opinion. And Colin says it's his opinion, so that's fine. I would point out that it's not the only opinion, and so it could be that you don't need rationality in order for your soul to survive death. And if that opinion turned out to be true, then Balaam's donkey, there's not a glottal stop in there. Balaam's donkey could have had an immortal soul even without the gift of reason. So that's a possibility on another opinion. Right. But Colin's saying, okay, let's go with this opinion. What are the consequences? Well, it's possible that God temporarily elevated the donkey to have a rational soul. The question would be whether that was intrinsic to the soul or whether it was a supernatural gift that was extrinsic to the soul. Because, for example, God can, like with the charismatic gifts that St. Paul talks about, he can let someone work miracles, and that's a superadded gift on top of the soul the human has. But God doesn't make that gift of miracles intrinsic to the person's soul that they can just do miracles on their own without God's intervention. And so this could be like that, where the donkey is able to, the donkey still has a non-rational soul, but as a superadded momentary gift, God elevates the donkey in such a way that he allows the donkey to reason and communicate. In that case, the donkey's soul would still intrinsically be non-rational, and if non-rational souls don't survive death, then the donkey's soul would not survive death. On the other hand, God might make it intrinsic momentarily to the donkey's soul, in which case it would appear this is no longer a donkey.
Yeah.
If it's been given a new intrinsic ability that donkeys do not have, right, it would seem it's not a donkey anymore. And so that would, but if that were the case, even if it's not a donkey anymore, if it were to die while its soul was in that state, then it would survive death because it would fulfill the condition of having a rational soul intrinsically. Then there's another possibility, which is that, and all of this is, we're taking this account literally.
Yes.
But there's another possibility, which is essentially God was translating for the donkey and enabling communication to happen in a way that didn't really affect the donkey's reasoning.
Yeah.
Because, when let's say you've got a dog, and same thing applies to any animal, but a dog, and the dog is barking about something, and you as the dog owner don't know what it's trying to communicate. It is trying to communicate something,
Right.
That's what the barking is for. But because the bandwidth of barking is so limited, it does not give you, the human, enough information to deduce what the dog is actually trying to say.
Right.
It may be saying, I'm hungry. It may be saying, I want out. It may be saying, what is that thing over there?
Right.
It may be saying any number of things. But it has a limited bandwidth in its ability to articulate those thoughts. And sometimes you can infer what it's thinking by context, like if it's at the door barking, it either maybe wants to go out or it's seeing something outside that is a problem or potential problem. But you can't always figure that out. Now, in the case of Balaam, God has sent an angel to stop him from carrying out his current plan. And the angel is standing in front of the donkey on the road, and the donkey is able to see the angel, whereas Balaam is not. And the donkey recognizes the angel as a potential threat and stops. And Balaam doesn't like that, so he ends up whacking on the donkey to try to get it moving, but donkeys don't often respond to that. They have a reputation for being stubborn. And eventually, the angel, having opened the donkey's eyes to be able to see the angel, it then opens its mouth to be able to communicate to Balaam. And all the donkey communicates really is a few things, like, okay, there was this angel that I saw, and haven't I faithfully served you all these years? Why would you decide to start whacking on me? Shouldn't you trust me?
Yeah.
Well, those are things that that donkeys could think without really having the full gift of reason.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just like you can imagine a dog. If a dog sees an angel over there, what is that thing over there? We better stop.
Right.
You know? And I mean, it won't have the words to articulate it, but
No,
it can
but-
have that thought.
Yeah.
And in the same way, if you start whacking on your dog, it's like, I thought we had this relationship. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And
Even without words.
Even
Right.
without words. And so it may be that the angel is simply allowing the donkey to verbalize thoughts that the donkey had, but didn't have the words. So this may just be a translation issue.
Yeah.
Just like if, one day we could hypothetically have, I mean, at some point we're likely to have machine telepathy where you can scan somebody's brain and tell what they're thinking. Well, that's going to be done on animals first. And we one day may have translation software to, put a little cap on your dog, scans its brains, tell you exactly what the barking is about.
Yeah.
And that's possible. In fact, there was a Far Side comic a few years ago, Gary Larson's Far Side one-panel comic, where the caption is that some guy has invented a translation device for dogs. And you see him, he's walking down the street in a neighborhood with lots of dogs, and he's got the headsets on for his translation device, and you see the little speech balloons coming up from the dogs for their barking, and it's all, hey, 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 hey.
That's all they say. Yeah, my dogs say hey too much. What a great question, Colin. Thanks. I'm glad you're reading the book of Numbers. I think it is one of those neglected books of the Bible. I just think that. I don't have any scientific
it's called Numbers?
No, I do not.
So number is, normally we think of a number as a noun, so like 3, 4, 5, those are all numbers. But number is also a verb.
Oh, to number things.
To number things, which means to count them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called Numbers, because at the beginning and the end of the book of Numbers, they number the Israelites. They count them and take a census.
Learn something new every day. We got a whole bunch more of these weird questions for Jimmy Akin. The people who give the questions are not weird. The questions are just off the beaten path. That's what we mean, and it's fun to do it.
Hence the name Weird Questions,
not weird people. Yeah. Although I don't want to prejudge. It could be that some of the people are weird. They may, in fact, even be proud that they're weird. I don't know. But it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. And Jimmy does this all the time, investigates interesting things at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You should check it out. And I also want to let you know that Dr. Ray is coming out here to San Diego. So if you're in the Southern California area, and you can join us next week, December 7th and 8th, Dr. Ray Guarendi will be taping EWTN's Living Right with Dr. Ray. For more information, you can just go to Catholic.com, click the button at the top of the page, and you find out all about the upcoming visit of Dr. Ray Guarendi to our neck of the woods, Southern California. Maybe we'll see you there. All right, we'll take a quick break. Right back with more Weird Questions for Jimmy Akin right after this.
This is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Debbie Georgiani.
And I'm Jerry Usher.
Join us for Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, Monday at noon Eastern.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Time flies when you're having fun. I can't believe we're already at this stage in the program, but Jimmy Akin's here, and we're doing weird questions for Jimmy Akin. We just give him weird questions that come to us. Well, they come to you. A lot of them come to you personally, Jimmy. And I don't know.
Also, people will send them to radio@catholic.com, and they get forwarded to me.
Yeah, and so we got a whole bunch of weird questions that people like to ask, and we love doing this. And send your questions. If a weird question occurs to you, we'll try our best to get it on with Jimmy one of these Friday afternoons when we do this. This one comes from Leah. What exactly is happening in the book of Tobit? Oh, wait, there's more. What exactly is happening in the book of Tobit when Sarah's husbands keep dying? Is a demon really killing them? If so, how? Possessing Sarah and causing her to kill them, possessing the husbands and having them kill themselves some other way?
So the answer is we don't know, because the book of Tobit does not tell us.
Mm-hmm.
What it says is that that she's had these 7 husbands, but they all die before they consummate. And the reason they die is because a demon kills them. And it doesn't say how the demon kills them. It does say, and we can think about other passages in Scripture. How do demons kill people? Well, in the Gospels, you may think about the father of the epileptic who comes to Jesus. And in this case, the epilepsy is related to a demon. Now, that's not always the case. It is not always demons when someone has epilepsy. But in this case, they are related. And the father says to Jesus that when the boy is in the grip of the demon, it will like try to throw him into the fire or things like that. And so it could be possible for a demon to possess a person and try to make them injure themselves or even kill themselves. That's one way that could happen. So that's a possibility in terms of what happens to Sarah's husbands. Another possibility, though, is it could be something else. During David's reign, David has displeased the Lord by taking a census when he shouldn't, and God gives him a choice of options for here's how we can deal with this. Here is a set of punishments, and he picks one that involves an angel coming and unleashing a plague. And so the angel is, from a modern perspective, would be manipulating microorganisms in a way that result in disease that kill people. And that would mean the angel has abilities that we would refer to today as telekinesis.
Oh, yeah.
Or psychokinesis. It's also the same thing. But, being able, since they're created intellect, being able to mentally manipulate matter.
Yeah.
And so if angels are telekinetic, then in a way that can manipulate microorganisms, then they could have made all of Sarah's husbands sick.
Yeah.
And killed them that way. Or if they are telekinetic, they could similarly just manipulate the matter in the husband's body, like pinching off their carotid artery long enough to starve the oxygen of brain and killing them that way. Or they could cause a heart attack, or they could burst a blood vessel and give them a stroke, or a hemorrhagic stroke, or move a blood clot around and give them an occlusive stroke. So there are bunches of options, given that angels appear to be telekinetic. The one option that would not be very consistent with what the text in Tobit says is the first one that Leah mentioned, of them possessing Sarah and causing her to kill them. While that might be possible in principle, it doesn't appear to be what's going on in Tobit, because actually that she gets accused of that, not of being possessed, but of killing the husbands. So her servant maids accuse her and say, "You're the one who's killing your husbands." And it's made very clear that is not the case. It is not Sarah. It is the demon. And that would suggest it is not the demon possessing Sarah.
Yeah.
In fact, Sarah prays to God and talks about how she's innocent of doing anything here. And even though she would be innocent, presumably if she's just being possessed and has no control, still it suggests that it's not by her hand, possessed or otherwise, it's not by her hand that these men are dying. So we're not really sure what's happening, but those are some of the possibilities. Also, it should point out that Tobit is based on various internal clues in the book, does not appear to be a straightforward historical account. It appears to be essentially an extended parable. And this is something that John Paul II, for example, talked about.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't suppose necessarily that this literally happened.
Leah, thanks very much for the question. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Chris asks this: if God is beyond time, time is not a concept to God, could the passion of Jesus still be going on, and then conceivably my sins could make the pain that Jesus endures even more? And then the opposite, if I sin less, Jesus receives less pain.
So the statement, time is not a concept to God, can be understood in more than one way. Obviously, God is omniscient. He knows everything, so he knows about the concept of time.
Yeah.
So it is a concept for him in that sense, but he's not bound by it. So the standard theological understanding and the position of the Catholic Church is that God is outside of time, and so it does not pass for him, and he embraces all of time. All of time is equally present to him all at once. Now, given that, Jesus' passion, which occurs inside of time in AD 33, is not literally still going on.
Yeah.
Because it occurs from our perspective.
Right.
Because we're in 2021, and it is not still going on because it occurred in AD 33. From God's perspective, though, both 2021 and AD 33 are equally real.
Yeah.
They're equally present to him. And so from the eternal perspective, well, it's not that it's still going on, because that implies a change in time if something's still the case. So it's not that the crucifixion is still going on from God's perspective, it just is going on from God's perspective because AD 33 is real to him.
Yeah.
It's also true from God's perspective that the crucifixion is not still going on in 2021. That's equally real as saying it is going on in 33, it is not going on in 2021. So it both is and is not going on from God's perspective, depending on which stretch of history you're talking about. Now, even if you didn't believe that God is outside of time, as long as you believe that God is omniscient and knows everything past, present, and future, then in his divine mind, as he suffered on the cross, Jesus knew about all your future sins, which he's dying for. He also knew in his divine mind about all your future acts of repentance and reparation.
Right.
And so, so even if it weren't true that God was outside of time, as long as he's omniscient, you still have an awareness in his divine mind of everything you've done, good and bad. And so the thing is, though, in his divine mind, he doesn't suffer. Because the divine nature is, to use the fancy theological word, the divine nature is impassible. It's not capable of passion or suffering. That means that in order for him to suffer, it has to be in his human nature. And so there would have to be an information transfer between his divine mind, which is omniscient, and his human mind as he's suffering on the cross. And hypothetically, he could transfer that information from his divine mind about your future sins or your future acts of repentance and reparation. That could be transferred into his human mind so he could think about it and it could have an effect on him emotionally.
Yeah.
But it is not clear that that happens. He obviously is thinking in some way about the future sins of humanity because he's dying for them. And he may well in some way be thinking about people are going to be grateful for this and they're going to repent and they're going to be saved and that's going to be great. So he may be consoled by those thoughts at the same time. But unless there's a supernatural transfer of information from his divine mind to his human mind, he's not going to have the specific knowledge of particular sins or like every little venial thing or particular acts of reparation. But it's possible for this to happen, and it would thus be a matter of speculation whether or not God is outside of time, and he is. But even if he weren't, just omniscience does the work here. And so it's a matter of open speculation to what extent was Jesus aware of future sins and future acts of reparation as he was in the midst of his suffering, and what effects did that have on his sufferings and consolations? And people have taken different positions about that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to say thanks for that question, Chris. Appreciate it. More to come, more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
My niece asked why we are not taught about Lilith.
Because she's not in the Bible. That's why, If I come out with the David Anders version of the Old Testament and I put, Gandalf into chapter 2 of the book of Genesis, right?
And you'd be tempted to do that,
I really would.
Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders. Tonight, 11 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, enjoying 2 hours with Jimmy Akin. And thank you very much. I hope you are as well. Or maybe you just joined us and you're going to enjoy the next few minutes with Jimmy Akin. I hope you will, because this next question is about a global catastrophe. And come on, that's entertaining. They make movies about global catastrophes. Rob says this.
For your entertainment.
For your entertainment. A giant meteor hurtling towards Earth for your entertainment. Rob says this. Say there was a global catastrophe that caused much destruction and prevented communication between the Americas and Europe. No one in the Americas knows if anyone still lives in Europe and has no way of finding out. In this scenario, would it be prudent for American cardinals to elect their own pontiff, or should they hope that papal succession is safe in Europe?
So this is an interesting disaster.
I know.
I'm trying to think about what would accomplish these effects, because if it were known that, let's say, a giant meteor, like the sweet meteor of death.
Yeah. Wait, is that a thing, the sweet meteor of death?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I got to look that up. I'm learning so much today.
Yeah, the sweet meteor of death has its own Twitter feed.
Okay.
And it runs for president every 4 years. It promises to end all of our problems.
Well, I guess it would.
Yeah. And so if we knew that the sweet meteor of death had impacted Europe, we would lose communication with Europe, and a massive asteroid strike would probably knock us down to at least temporarily down to Stone Age technology. So we wouldn't be able to find out anything for sure, but American cardinals could probably infer that everybody in Europe, or at least the Pope in Europe, was dead.
Yeah.
And likely all of the cardinals in Europe had likely died as well.
Right.
And it was not going to be possible to hold a conclave in Europe. But that's Europe. There are cardinals elsewhere in the world, and so the American cardinals should not hold a conclave just on their own if they're able to bring in cardinals from other places like South America and Australia and Asia and Africa and so forth. So just because Europe is unreachable and everybody there is presumably dead, that wouldn't justify one group of cardinals holding a conclave and electing a new pope.
Right.
Also, there's a question of how quickly can we get answers? Now, the way the question's been framed, it implies we're not going to be getting them soon, because otherwise the thing to do would be to just wait, and wait until it's been reestablished. So we need to envision a scenario where communication cannot be reestablished for an extended period of time. Let's say a generation. Because if it's just a few years, well, then you just wait a few years. It's okay. We've had periods before where, for various logistical reasons, there was no pope for a few years. The church can function that way. And in fact, everybody's going to be rebuilding for a few years anyway if there's been this kind of global catastrophe.
Right.
So priests are perfectly able, and local bishops are perfectly able to distribute sacraments and keep things going. They know how to do their jobs. If they didn't, we wouldn't have the distributed system of church governance we do anyway. So you just keep doing what you need to do. And where the Pope becomes essential is in response to, he provides a general management role that's important, but where he really, but you can kind of act on inertia based on previous papal instructions in an interregnal period between the reigns of popes.
Right.
And even if it's an extended interregnal period, you can still, we've got copies of the Code of Canon Law and the Sacramentary, we can keep things going. It's only when there's a disruption to the normal life of the church, let's say caused by heresy, where it becomes urgent that you be able to consult the Pope. and otherwise you can just follow his ordinary instructions. And so, so let's say Europe is unreachable for a generation or more. Well, by that point, the Pope's going to be dead anyway because it's a generation, and we're now operating in a low-tech environment where we don't have good ways of keeping people alive beyond a normal human lifespan. And if there are cardinals over there, who are in communication with each other, they would presumably elect a new pope when the current one dies or resigns, in which case we shouldn't do that. So what should we do? Well, if we're able to get together a group, all the rest of the cardinals of the world, and I'm imagining something like there's a curtain of antimatter around Europe that's stopping people from getting in or out or communicating, but all the rest of the world can communicate. Well, then they should, get on ships or whatever and meet and decide what to do about the matter. If it's going to be more than a generation before they can find out about is there a pope or not, it is hypothetically conceivable, at least should a crisis arise, like a heresy.
Yeah.
And in the wake of an apocalyptic disaster, heresies could arise.
Sure.
But should that happen, I can imagine them electing a conditional pope. That is,
if there's no other pope.
If there is no other pope, this guy is the pope. But if we later and we elect him only to deal with the current emergency, that's why we're electing him.
Mm-hmm.
And we can elect successors and things like that. But only if the actual previous legitimate pope is still alive and has not resigned, and they have a legitimate succession going on in Europe that we later discover once the antimatter curtain goes away.
Right.
And so and then it would be up to the true pope to retroactively validate or invalidate the actions of the conditional pope.
Yeah.
And if it's later determined there is no surviving papacy in Europe, then the conditional pope would be the pope, and his actions would not need validation or overruling.
Nice. All right.
But that assumes that they are facing a crisis where they need a pope. And if they don't, then what I would suggest as an alternative is for the surviving College of Cardinals to arrange for I need to think about the exact legal language to use, but basically a necessity modification in canon law for them to be able to appoint their own successors as cardinals.
Oh, yeah, right.
So that when the situation in Europe becomes clear, if they are the only cardinals left, they will be able to elect a new pope.
That's a great question. I'm not exactly sure what the nature of that catastrophe is, but it is a fascinating catastrophe, Rob. Appreciate it. And you can have a wild hypothetical. It's weird questions with Jimmy Akin. This one comes from Kyle. Kyle, thank you for this question. I think everyone wants to know this. Did Jesus know how to build an airplane? Is there a way to say that he didn't without calling into question his divine omniscience as the second person of the Holy Trinity?
Yeah, and we've covered in this very episode some of the principles relevant to that. So Jesus has a divine intellect which is omniscient and does know how to build an airplane. Mm-hmm. And then he has a human intellect, which if you look in the section of the Catechism of the Catholic Church on Jesus' human knowledge, it'll cover these principles. But it says that Jesus' human intellect was not omniscient and was conditioned by the time in which he lived in. And so since how to build an airplane was not common knowledge in the 1st century AD, right, that information would not naturally be present in his human intellect. So if since it wasn't his divine intellect, it would be possible for there to be a supernatural transfer of information of how to build an airplane from the divine intellect to his human intellect if God wanted that to happen. The question is then, did God want that to happen? And the position that theologians have taken in some centuries would seem to be yes. People like Thomas Aquinas seem to think that Jesus knew everything about the actual world, including all of its future history, including every bit of every airplane that would ever be built.
That's what Thomas Aquinas thought.
Yeah, he didn't know about airplanes, but that's what he thought, that Jesus had universal knowledge of the real world, not of every hypothetical world that could exist. That's how he protects the finitude of Jesus's human intellect. He only has comprehensive knowledge of the real world.
Right.
And others followed that opinion. So it's a kind of pseudo-omniscience, where he's omniscient, he knows everything about the real world, but not about every possible world.
Sure.
I don't find that plausible. I don't think that fits with the data we see in the Gospels, and neither does the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The current magisterial understanding of this question, as illustrated in the Catechism, is that there was supernatural information transfer between Jesus' divine mind and his human mind, but it pertained to his mission to save humanity. And so the information he needed to perform his mission and give his teachings, that was transferred. But other information that was not essential to his mission, like when is a particular prophetic event in the future going to happen, he wasn't sent to reveal that. It wasn't part of his mission. And so the Catechism states that Jesus acknowledged not knowing that because he hadn't been sent to reveal it. Well, Jesus did not come to teach the Wright brothers how to build an airplane.
Right.
And so my take, based on what the Catechism says, would be that it was not essential to Jesus' mission to announce how to build an airplane, and therefore he would have had that information in his divine intellect, but there was no reason, and thus supernatural information transfer did not happen to put that information in his human intellect.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you very, very much for that question. Kind of a perennial. Did Jesus know how to build an airplane?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you hear that question all the time. You want to try another question?
Yeah.
This one? All right. What's the deal? This is from Joseph. What's the real deal with Ed and Lorraine Warren? I can assume that the movie Prelude statement about them being commissioned by the church is a stretch or even a lie, though they do have a bunch of supposed possessed items, one being the Annabelle doll. Mm-hmm. My curiosity is intrigued on this. I can't imagine the church would enlist lay people to do this type of work. Is it all just a lie?
It's not all a lie, but so for people who may not be familiar, Ed and Lorraine Warren were a couple who, then they both passed on now, but Lorraine only passed on recently. And they were a couple of essentially amateur demonologists.
Okay.
And they were involved in various paranormal cases. They're very popular because they did a lot of appearances on like late night radio and stuff, where they talked about like Annabelle, the doll that would be infested rather than possessed by demons if it were. But they're not generally well regarded in a lot of the scholarly paranormal community. For example, they fell for the Amityville horror case, which was a hoax.
Okay.
And they fell for it. And they were not regarded as being really competent in this area. I wouldn't preclude the idea that some priest somewhere asked them to consult on something, because part of the rite of exorcism directs priests to ask for consultors. And I wouldn't doubt that some priest or set of priests occasionally asked them to consult, but they weren't like working for the church in a formal capacity, and frankly, I wouldn't value their opinion as consultors very much. But I'll talk about that more on Mysterious World.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Joseph, for the question. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You can find it on the internet. Just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Jimmy, thank you very much for 2 weird hours.
My pleasure, Cy Kellett, for 2 weird hours.
We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.